The glass of champagne in my husband's hand trembled, then stopped, frozen in mid-air. His mouth hung open, a perfect little of shock. Every important person from his company was here, all the people he wanted to impress. But he wasn't looking at them. He was staring at me. Or more accurately, he was staring at the man whose hand was resting gently on the small of my back. A man my husband, Mark, knew very, very well. It was his boss. The big boss. The man who owned the entire company, Mr. Alistair Finch. And he was my date. My name is Jonna Anton. For 20 years, I wasn't really Jonna. I was Mark's wife. I was the woman who ironed his shirts just right, who remembered his clients' birthdays, and who made sure the house was always perfect for his work dinners. I gave up my dream of being a painter to support his dream of climbing the corporate ladder. I thought that's what love was. Helping your partner succeed, even if it meant you disappeared a little bit each day. I loved him, and I thought he loved all of me, every single part. That all changed a week ago. Mark stood in the doorway of our bedroom, his eyes scanning me up and down. I was holding up a beautiful blue dress, the one I had saved for his big end-of-year work party. He didn't smile. He just sighed, a long, tired sound. "Jonna," he said, and his voice was cold. "Don't wear that. Actually, I don't think you should come at all. You've let yourself go. You're too fat for my work party." The words hit me harder than a slap. I just stood there, the blue dress falling from my fingers. For a whole day, I cried. I looked at myself in the mirror and saw everything he said. I saw the extra pounds I'd gained after taking care of my sick mother. I saw the tired lines around my eyes from sleepless nights worrying about his job. I saw a woman I didn't recognize anymore. He didn't just call me fat. He told me I was not good enough. He told me that my 20 years of sacrifice meant nothing. That night, as the tears finally dried, something new sparked inside me. It wasn't sadness. It was pure, cold anger. The next morning, I didn't make him his coffee. I didn't iron his shirt. Instead, I went through his old work files, the ones he kept in the study. I wasn't sure what I was looking for, but I knew his whole life was in that office. And that's when I found it. A file labeled, Finch, Personal. It was filled with notes on Mr. Alistair Finch. Not just his business deals, but personal things Mark had learned. His favorite charity, the name of his late wife, and the fact that he was a huge fan of old classic art. My old passion. A plan started to form in my mind, a wild and scary plan. I found Mr. Finch's charity online and saw they were having a small art auction. My heart pounded in my chest. Using the savings I had secretly kept from my mother's inheritance, I bought a small, beautiful painting from a local artist I admired. I then called Mr. Finch's office, not as Mark's wife, but as a donor. I told his assistant I had a piece of art I wanted to personally give to Mr. Finch for his charity, in honor of his late wife. He agreed to meet me. When I walked into his huge, quiet office, he was kind and his eyes were gentle. We didn't just talk about the painting. I told him about my own love for art, the dreams I had put away. We talked for 2 hours. He told me about his wife and how much she loved art. For the first time in years, I felt seen. I felt like Jonna again. As I was leaving, I did the bravest thing I have ever done. I turned and said, "I know this is forward, but my husband decided I wasn't fit to be his date at his company party. I was wondering if you had a date." And now, here we are, walking into that very party. Every head has turned. The whispers are like electricity in the air. Mark looks like he has seen a ghost. The smirk he always wore is gone, replaced by a pale, sick fear. I'm wearing a sparkling silver dress that hugs my curves in all the right places. A dress that screams confidence. Mr. Finch leans down and whispers in my ear, his voice warm. "You are the most beautiful woman in this room, Jonna." For the first time, I believe it. What Mark doesn't know is that Mr. Finch and I have been talking all week. He doesn't know that Mr. Finch looked into his file after our meeting and found some interesting things. Things about how Mark has been treating his coworkers and taking credit for other people's ideas. Mark thinks I'm just here to make him jealous. He has no idea that tonight is not just about a party. Tonight is about everything he is about to lose. His world is about to come crashing down around him, and I am the one holding the hammer. This is the part of the story where everything changes. What would you do if you were me? Would you forgive, or would you fight back? The next chapter of my life is just beginning. If you want to see Mark get everything he deserves, make sure you subscribe to the channel so you don't miss what happens next. I'd love to know who is on this journey with me, so please comment below and tell me what city or country you're watching from. Now, back to the party. Mr. Finch slowly guided me through the crowd, straight towards my frozen husband. He didn't let go of my waist. When we finally stood in front of Mark, Mr. Finch smiled a polite, cold smile. Mark just stared, speechless. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. Mr. Finch spoke first, his voice calm and clear, but loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. "Anton," he said, nodding at my husband. "I've been meaning to talk to you. I was just reviewing the retirement packages. At your age, it's never too early to start planning your exit, is it?" Mark's face went from white to red in a second. The word exit hung in the air between us, a guillotine waiting to drop. His eyes darted around the room, seeing his co-workers, his rivals, all staring. They had always seen him as a lion, a king. Now they were seeing a scared little man whose world was cracking right under his feet. He looked at me, his eyes begging, pleading for me to save him, to explain that this was all a joke. But I just stood there, my expression as empty as the promises he had made to me for 20 years. He always had a plan for his retirement. I remember one night years ago, he spread a map across our kitchen table. He pointed to Italy, to France, to a beach in Spain. "This is where we'll go, Jonna," he'd said, not looking at me. "Once I cash out, we'll live like royalty." But then he'd added, "I'll need to be in my best shape then. No dead weight." I had laughed it off as a bad joke. But I should have known. He had a whole life planned, a life that was getting smaller and smaller for me. He never knew I found his secret notebook, the one where he planned his real future. Back at the party, Mr. Finch wasn't finished. He smiled at the crowd. "Mark here just landed the huge Henderson account," he announced. Everyone clapped, but it was weak, uncertain. They could all feel the tension. Mr. Finch turned back to Mark. "Incredible work. Tell me, Mark, what was the final piece of the puzzle? What did you discover about Mr. Henderson's investment history that finally convinced him to sign?" All eyes were on my husband. A single drop of sweat trickled down his temple. He had no idea what the answer was. But I did. I was the one who spent 3 weeks digging into old newspapers and forgotten company reports. I was the one who discovered that Mr. Henderson's father had lost his fortune to a company just like Mark's. Mark had wanted to bury that fact, to hide it. But I told him to do the opposite. I told him to bring it up, to show Mr. Henderson a new, safer way to invest his family's money. It was my idea. But what Mark never told anyone, what I never even told him, was that I had a secret coffee meeting with Mr. Henderson's wife to make it happen. Mark stammered, his mouth opening and closing like a fish. "It was, a complex algorithm," he mumbled, looking at the floor. Mr. Finch just nodded slowly, a disappointed look on his face. The silence was deafening. Everyone knew he was lying. In that moment, he wasn't a boss or a leader. He was just a fraud in an expensive suit. His power, the thing he loved more than anything, was dissolving right in front of him, and he had no idea how to stop it. He was drowning, and I wasn't even going to throw him a rope. As Mark's reputation crumbled, I saw a young woman across the room. Her name was Clara, a quiet intern Mark always talked about, saying how he was her mentor. But she wasn't watching him with respect. She was watching him with a cold, satisfied smile. It was a look I recognized. The look of someone who was finally seeing justice. I remembered seeing her leaving his office late one night a few months ago, trying to hide her tears. At the time, I told myself it was just work stress. But now I knew it was something much darker. Mr. Finch seemed to decide that Mark had suffered enough for now. He turned to me, his whole mood changing. "Jonna," he said, his voice warm and loud enough for everyone to hear. "Your insights on art are fascinating. Our company needs more soul. I'm starting a new fund to support local artists, and I would be honored if you would agree to be our lead consultant." The room gasped. He wasn't just my date. He was offering me a job. A position. He was giving me a future, right as he was taking Mark's away. Mark couldn't take it anymore. The last bit of his control snapped. He lunged forward and grabbed my arm, his fingers digging into my skin. "Jonna, what is this?" he hissed, his voice a low, angry growl. "What did you do?" His face was twisted and ugly. This was the real Mark. Not the charming man he showed to the world, but the monster he saved just for me, the one who called me fat and worthless in the safety of our home. But we weren't at home now. And I wasn't his quiet, scared wife anymore. I yanked my arm from his grip. The fire that had been slowly building inside me for a week finally erupted. I looked him straight in his panicked eyes. My voice was quiet, but it was sharper than a knife. "You told me I wasn't good enough to be here, Mark," I said, my words cutting through the silence. "So I decided to come with a man who thought I was." I held his gaze, letting him see the woman he had tried to break, now standing here stronger than ever. I was no longer a shadow. I was the storm. Before he could say another word, Mr. Finch stepped between us. He gently placed a hand on my shoulder, shielding me from Mark. His eyes were like chips of ice as he stared my husband down. "Anton, you and I have a meeting in my office at 8 a.m. Monday. Do not be late," he said. Then he looked at Mark's terrified face and delivered the final blow. "But Jonna and I have things to discuss tonight. It's about the house. And the accounts. You see, she showed me your other notebook." The words "other notebook" struck Mark like a physical blow. All the color drained from his face, leaving it a pasty, sickly gray. The fear in his eyes was no longer just about his job. It was pure, animal terror. This was the look of a man whose secret hidden world had just been ripped open for everyone to see. The crowd murmured, confused by the words but understanding the feeling. They were watching a king lose his crown, his castle, and his entire kingdom in a single, devastating moment. And I was the one who had handed his enemy the key. It started a month ago, when I was looking for my mother's old recipe book in the back of our shared closet. Tucked away under a pile of old blankets, I found a leather-bound journal. It was the first notebook, the one filled with his plans. I read pages detailing how he found me boring, how my weight embarrassed him, how he was just waiting to hit his financial target before leaving me. He even had a cold, calculated budget for my divorce settlement. I cried for hours, feeling like my whole life had been a lie. But as terrible as that first notebook was, it was nothing compared to the second one. A week later, fueled by a sad, desperate need to understand, I searched his office. Taped to the bottom of his heavy oak desk drawer, I found a small black book. This one wasn't filled with cruel words about me. It was filled with numbers, dates, and names. It was a detailed record of every dishonest thing he had ever done at his job. He thought he was so smart, hiding it where no one would ever look. He never imagined his fat, boring wife would be the one to find it. Back at the party, Mark's terror turned to frantic action. He ignored Mr. Finch, his boss, the man who held his entire life in his hands. He only saw me. He lunged again, grabbing my wrist. His whisper was a desperate, panicked hiss. "Jonna, please. Not here. We can talk about this. That book. It's just ideas, just brainstorming. It's not real. Please, Jonna, you're destroying our lives." He said our lives, but I knew he only cared about his. He was no longer a powerful man. He was a boy caught with his hand in the cookie jar. I looked down at his fingers squeezing my wrist, and a memory flashed in my mind. I was 25, so excited to show him a painting I had just finished. I was about to take it to a local art show. He had grabbed my wrist then, too. Gently, but with a firmness that left no room for argument. "Don't, honey," he had said with a fake smile. "Your place is here with me. Let other people have their little hobbies." He called my dream a hobby. He had been slowly erasing me for years. I looked him in the eye and pulled my arm free. "No, Mark. We are finished talking." The black notebook was his real story. He called his methods creative accounting and aggressive negotiations. I called it what it was: stealing. It started small, faking receipts on business trips, claiming dinners he never had. But the numbers grew. He detailed how he took money from project budgets and funneled it into a secret bank account. He bragged about sabotaging a coworker to get a promotion. And one name appeared again and again: Henderson. He hadn't just won that account with my idea. He had bribed someone on the inside to get it. Mr. Finch stepped forward, placing himself between me and the man who was technically still my husband. He cleared his throat, and his voice boomed through the now silent ballroom. "My apologies for this personal interruption," he announced, though he did not look sorry at all. "But it seems some very serious company matters have come to my attention." He scanned the crowd and his eyes landed on a man near the back. "Frank," he said to a board member, "cancel my morning golf game. We'll need an emergency board meeting on Monday, 7 a.m. sharp." With that, the show was over. Mr. Finch gently placed a hand on my back and guided me towards the grand exit, away from the wreckage of Mark's life. I couldn't resist one last look over my shoulder. Mark was standing completely alone in the center of the room. His shoulders were slumped. His head was bowed. All the power and arrogance had drained away, leaving only a hollowed-out shell. For just 1 second, my heart ached for the young man I had fallen in love with. Then I remembered his words, "You're too fat," and the ache vanished, replaced by cold, hard steel. We stepped out into the cool night. The city lights twinkled below us, and the air felt clean and fresh. For the first time in 20 years, I felt like I could finally breathe. Mr. Finch turned to me, his expression softening. "Are you all right, Jonna?" he asked, his voice full of genuine concern. I nodded, a real smile touching my lips. "I will be," I said. "What happens to him now?" I asked, needing to know. "Now," Mr. Finch said grimly, "we make sure he can never hurt anyone else again." He paused, his kind eyes turning serious. "The notebook was the key, Jonna. It proves the fraud and the theft. But it's not just about the money he stole from the company." He hesitated, as if he wasn't sure he should show me. "It's about why he needed so much money, so fast." He then pulled out his phone and turned the screen towards me. My breath caught in my throat. It was a picture of Mark. He was laughing, looking younger and happier than I had seen him in years. His arm was wrapped around Clara, the young intern. And Clara was holding a baby. The image on the phone screen burned into my brain. Mark. Clara. A baby. My mind couldn't make sense of it. The sounds of the city, the distant traffic, the cool night air, it all disappeared. There was only a roaring silence in my ears. A baby. It wasn't just that he cheated. It wasn't just an affair with a younger woman from his office. He had built a whole other life. A secret world where he was a father, a partner, a man I never knew. He had a family. And I was the secret he kept from them. My mind started to spin, going back in time, grabbing all the little broken pieces and sticking them together. The late nights, he said, were for closing a deal. The strange credit card charges from a town an hour away, for places like Babyland and the Little Sprout, which he said were mistakes. I remember finding a tiny pink sock once in his laundry, and he laughed, saying it must have come from the laundromat. All the lies, all the excuses I had believed because I wanted to, because I loved him. They now formed a perfect, horrifying picture. I looked up from the phone, my hands trembling. How? Was the only word I could manage to push out of my throat. Mr. Finch, whose name was Alistair, looked at me with deep sympathy. After you showed me the notebook, he said gently, I needed to know where the money was going. I hired a private investigator. He followed Mark for a week. The money from your joint savings, the money he stole from the company, it was all going to them. To support his second family. My husband wasn't just a liar and a thief. He was the star of 2 different shows. My throat felt tight. I forced myself to ask the next question, the one that felt like swallowing glass. How old is the baby? Alistair hesitated before answering. 1 year old, he said softly. 1 year. My mind instantly flew back. A year ago. I was sitting in a sterile white room at a nursing home, holding my mother's frail hand as she took her last breaths. I remembered calling Mark, crying, and he had been short with me, saying he was in a huge meeting and couldn't talk. He wasn't in a meeting. He was at a hospital, holding his newborn child. A new feeling washed over me, so powerful it pushed the sadness away. It was rage. A pure, clean, beautiful rage. The man I had supported, the man I had comforted, the man whose cruelty I had excused, had been celebrating a new life while I was mourning a death. The last bit of love I had for him, the tiny, foolish hope that maybe we could fix things, died in that moment. It turned to ash and blew away in the cold night wind. I looked at Alistair, my voice suddenly steady. Does she know? Does Clara know about me? Alistair shook his head slowly. That's the most twisted part of it all, he said. Mark told her that his wife had died in a car accident 2 years ago. He played the part of the grieving widower. As far as she knows, you don't exist. She thinks he's a single father, a hero who is working hard to provide for her and their child. My husband hadn't just erased me from his future. He had buried me in his past. He had turned me into a ghost in my own life, haunting a house that was never really a home. Alistair looked at me with concern. Let me take you home, Jonna. You shouldn't be alone. I shook my head, a firm, clear thought cutting through my anger. No, I said, my voice stronger than I had ever heard it. Don't take me there. That's his house. That's not my home anymore. For the first time, the thought of leaving wasn't scary. It was the only thing that made sense. I was finally choosing myself. I was walking away from the rubble of my old life to build something new, something that was just for me. As we drove away in his warm, quiet car, I didn't look back. I imagined Mark finally leaving the party, his head held low, getting into his car to drive back to an empty, dark house. I thought about the job Alistair had offered me, a chance to rediscover the part of myself I had buried for so long. A new life was waiting for me. But there was still one problem. My paintings, my mother's jewelry, the last things I had of my family, they were all still in that house, and I knew Mark would not make it easy for me to get them. Alistair seemed to read my mind. My personal lawyer is one of the best divorce attorneys in the state, he said, his eyes on the road. I called her this afternoon. I told her everything. The notebooks, the secret account, the baby. She's ready to file the papers whenever you are. We will make sure you get everything you deserve, Jonna. He was offering me an army to fight my battles, a shield to protect me from the man I had once protected. I wasn't alone in this fight. I finally found my voice and whispered, "Thank you, Alistair." He glanced at me and gave a small, reassuring smile. "We'll start the legal process on Monday," he said. "But there's one more thing you should know. The investigator didn't just find the bank accounts and the apartment he bought for Clara." He paused, turning onto a quiet street. He found where Mark was hiding the stolen cash before he started moving it. It's not in a bank. According to the notes in his black book, it's much closer to home. Closer to home. The words echoed in the quiet car. My mind flashed through every room of the house I had spent 20 years building. The kitchen where I made his favorite meals. The bedroom we had shared. The garden where I planted roses every spring. The thought of him hiding his stolen dirty money within those walls felt like a final, disgusting violation. It was like finding a snake coiled up under our bed. I turned to Alistair, my voice a tight whisper. Where? Where in our house? Alistair kept his eyes on the road, his hands steady on the steering wheel. Mark was arrogant, but he was also theatrical, he explained. The investigator found a note in the black book, a kind of code. It just said, "Safe beneath the watchful eyes of the one I forgot." A riddle. My husband, the man who I thought was so simple and straightforward, had created a treasure map for his stolen fortune. And I was the only person in the world who could probably read it. He was so sure I would never find it. The one I forgot. Who had he forgotten? My mind raced through a list of names. Old college friends he no longer spoke to. Distant cousins he never called. Then, an image flashed in my head, as clear as a photograph. It was from 20 years ago, when we first moved into the house. I was hanging a beautiful, old portrait of my great-grandmother. Mark had hated it. "Her eyes are creepy, Jonna," he'd said. "They follow you." He made me take it down and put it in the attic. The watchful eyes. The one he forgot. It had to be. "The attic," I said out loud. He hid it in the attic, behind a painting of my great-grandmother. The plan clicked into place in my mind with sudden, sharp clarity. We had to get to the house. We had to get that money. It wasn't about the cash itself. It was the proof. It was the final nail in the coffin of his lies. It was my ticket out, my security for a future that was suddenly a terrifying, empty page. "We have to go there now," I urged Alistair. "Before he gets there." Alistair glanced at me, his expression serious. "That's the problem, Jonna. He's not at the party anymore. My investigator just texted. Mark left right after we did. He's probably halfway home by now, desperate to get to that money and destroy the evidence." My heart sank. Mark was a cornered animal, and he was heading back to his den. There was no way we could get there first. He would lock the doors, and we would lose our only chance. The perfect plan had hit a wall. I sat in the silent car, watching the city lights blur past. I thought about Mark's weaknesses. His ego, his pride, and his mother. A new, dangerous idea sparked in my mind. "I know how to keep him away from the house," I said slowly. "His parents live in the Oak Meadow retirement home, an hour in the other direction. His mother has a weak heart. The smallest thing sends him into a panic." I knew the head nurse there, a kind woman named Linda. I had spent so much time there with my own mother. Alistair looked at me, understanding immediately. He didn't say if it was right or wrong. He simply handed me his phone. My fingers trembled as I dialed the number. For a moment, I hesitated. Was I really about to use his elderly, sick mother to trap him? I saw the picture in my mind again. Mark, Clara, and the baby. I thought about him ignoring my calls while my own mother was dying. The hesitation vanished. I pressed the call button. "Linda? It's Jonna Anton," I said, my voice filled with a fake, breathless panic. "Is everything okay with Martha? I just had this terrible feeling." The trap was set. We waited in tense silence for 10 minutes, which felt like 10 years. Then, Alistair's phone buzzed with a text. It was the investigator. He took the bait. He got a call from the home. His car just got on the freeway, heading north, away from the house. A wave of relief washed over me, so strong it almost made me dizzy. It worked. The race was on, and we were in the lead. Alistair turned the car around, and we sped towards my old life. Pulling up to the dark house was strange. It didn't feel like my home anymore. It felt like a museum of a life that was no longer mine. A crime scene. Using my key, which was still on my keychain, felt like a small victory. We stepped inside the silent house. It smelled the same, of lemon polish and old books. Alistair stood guard by the front door while I walked towards the hallway. I pulled the cord, and the attic stairs unfolded with a familiar, dusty creak. My heart pounded against my ribs. Taking a small flashlight from the kitchen drawer, I climbed into the darkness. The air was thick and smelled of old wood and forgotten things. My light cut through the black, landing on stacks of boxes, old furniture, and finally, on the portrait of my great-grandmother. Her painted eyes did seem to follow me. Taking a deep breath, I reached my hand behind the heavy frame. My fingers brushed against dust, then canvas, then something else. Something leathery and full. I had found it. Just as my fingers wrapped around the bag, a floorboard creaked loudly from the living room directly below me. It wasn't Alistair. Someone else was in the house. The creak of the floorboard shot through me like a bolt of lightning. I froze, my hand clamped around the leather bag, my breath caught in my throat. Every muscle in my body screamed at me to run, but I was trapped in the dusty darkness of the attic, a ghost in my own home. My mind raced. It had to be Mark. He must have realized the call about his mother was a trick. He had come back for his money, and I was cornered. All I could hear was the frantic, wild pounding of my own heart. The fear I felt in that moment was different. For 20 years, I had lived with a quiet, simmering fear of Mark's moods, of his sharp words, of his disappointment that could fill a room and crush the air from my lungs. But this was new. This was a raw, physical fear for my safety. The old me would have shrunk into a corner, made herself small, and cried silently. But the old me died the day he called me fat. The woman holding this bag of stolen money was not going to hide. She was going to fight. Then, a voice floated up from the living room, breaking the silence. A woman's voice. "Hello, Mark. Are you here?" It was a young voice, soft with confusion and fear. It wasn't a threat. I heard Alistair reply, his tone low and surprised. "Who are you? What are you doing here?" I crept to a crack in the wooden floorboards, my body trembling, and peered down. I saw a young woman with a long, dark ponytail standing in the entryway. My heart stopped. It was Clara. I stayed completely still, hidden in the shadows, and listened. Clara was crying, her voice shaking. "Mark called me," she explained to Alistair. "He sounded crazy. He said everything was ruined. He told me to come here to his office and get a folder of important papers for him. He said he had to go see his mom but would be back soon." She held up a key. "He told me where he hides the spare. What is going on? Who are you?" Mark had sent her here, into the lion's den, to clean up his mess. He was using her, just like he had used me. My mind was a whirlwind of confusion. This girl, this woman who was living the life that should have been mine, was not the monster I had imagined. She looked young, scared, and completely lost. She was just another pawn in Mark's selfish game. Looking at her, I didn't feel the hot rage I expected. I felt a strange, unwelcome pang of pity. She was a victim, too. My fight was with the man who had lied to us both, the puppet master who had played with our lives. As I watched, Clara clutched her stomach, a look of panic on her face. "He said we had to leave town. He said to pack a bag for me and for Leo," she sobbed. "What am I supposed to tell our son?" Leo. The baby in the picture had a name. He was real. He was a little boy who was about to lose his father, whose whole world was built on a foundation of lies and stolen money. This was no longer just about my revenge. It was about an innocent child who would be caught in the explosion of his father's making. Hearing the baby's name changed everything. I couldn't let Clara see me. I couldn't let this become a screaming match between two broken-hearted women. That's what Mark would have wanted. He would have loved to see us tear each other apart while he slipped away. My enemy was Mark, and I had to stay focused. I needed to get out of that house with the evidence, unseen. My gaze darted around the dark attic and landed on a small square window at the far end, overlooking the back porch roof. It was my only way out. I crept over to the wall and tapped 3 times on the floorboards, a simple code Alistair and I had agreed on. Trouble. Create a distraction. Immediately, I heard Alistair's voice boom from downstairs, drawing Clara's attention. What do you mean, papers? Let me see this office. The files in this house are company property now. As they moved towards the front of the house, I scrambled to the window. With all my strength, I pushed the old wooden frame. It screamed in protest before lurching open. Clutching the heavy bag of money to my chest, I squeezed through the small opening. The cool night air was a shock after the stuffy attic. My feet found the slanted shingles of the porch roof. I was shaking, my body flooded with adrenaline. I slid down the roof, my dress catching and tearing, and dropped the final few feet into the soft, damp grass of my backyard. I landed with a soft thud, my ankles aching. I was out. I was holding the proof. I was free. I scrambled to my feet and ran, not looking back, my breath coming in ragged gasps. I found Alistair's car parked down the street, hidden in the shadows. A minute later, he slid into the driver's seat, his face pale and grim. She's still in there, he said. Looking for a file that doesn't exist. She has no idea. I clutched the bag in my lap. We had done it. As he started the engine, his phone buzzed. A new text from the investigator. I leaned over and read it with him. My blood ran cold. The text said, Clara didn't come alone. Someone just got out of her car. It's her father. And I know him. It's Detective Frank Miller, from the Financial Crimes Unit. The words on the phone screen seemed to mock me. Financial Crimes Unit. The laughter that had been bubbling inside me, the pure joy of my escape, died instantly. This was no longer a messy divorce. It was no longer about a cheating husband and a broken heart. We had stepped into a much bigger, much more dangerous game. The man whose daughter my husband had betrayed was the one man in the entire city who could not only ruin Mark, but could also ruin us. We were no longer the hunters. We were the prey. My mind, which had felt so clear and sharp just moments before, was now a storm of confusion. Was this all a coincidence? Or was Mark smarter and more evil than I ever could have imagined? I thought back, trying to see the bigger picture. Mark always talked about being protected, about being untouchable. He hadn't just had an affair. He had chosen his affair with surgical precision. He had built himself a human shield, a firewall made from a young girl's love and her father's police badge. Alistair slammed his hand on the steering wheel, his composure finally cracking. He's a cop, Jonna, he said, his voice tight with a new kind of fear. We just snuck out of a house, and you are holding a bag filled with stacks of cash. Think about how this looks. His daughter is inside, crying. We look like burglars who threatened her. If her father finds us now, we're the ones who go to jail. Not Mark. The perfect revenge plan had just backfired in the worst possible way. Even Alistair, the powerful CEO who could make titans of industry tremble, looked shaken. Maybe we pushed too hard, he said, more to himself than to me. This is beyond lawyers and boardrooms now. This is his world, not mine. For the first time, I saw a flicker of doubt in his eyes. He was used to being in control, but this was a game where he didn't know the rules. In that moment, I knew I couldn't fall apart. It was my turn to be strong. The frightened wife was gone for good. No, I said, my voice cutting through his panic. We didn't go too far. He did. A memory of Mark surfaced in my mind. We were arguing about a bad investment he had made, and I told him I had a bad feeling about it. He had patted me on the head like a child. You're too emotional, Jonna, he'd said with a smirk. Don't worry your pretty little head about it. I handle the important things. That feeling of being dismissed, of being treated like I was stupid, fueled me now. Drive, Alistair, I commanded. Just drive. We couldn't go to the police. The police were now the enemy. We couldn't go to Alistair's lawyers, not until we knew exactly what we were up against. The leather bag on my lap was a ticking time bomb. It was the evidence that could free me, but it could also be the evidence that could imprison me. We needed to go somewhere safe, somewhere off the grid. Somewhere no one would ever think to look for the CEO of a major company and his quiet, invisible wife. An image came to my mind, a ghost from a life I had almost forgotten. A small, dusty art studio in the oldest part of the city. I used to rent it for almost nothing before Mark and I got married. It was my sanctuary, my happy place. Mark had hated it. He said it smelled like turpentine and failure, and made me give it up. I knew the owner, an elderly woman named Martha, was still there. It was the last place in the world Mark would ever look for me. It was perfect. The drive was the longest 20 minutes of my life. Every pair of headlights in the rearview mirror looked like a police car. A distant siren made my whole body tense up. The bag sat between us like a third passenger, heavy with secrets. Unable to resist, I opened the zipper just a crack. It was filled with stacks of $100 bills, just as I'd expected. But underneath the cash, I saw something else. A small, red notebook and a silver flash drive. The rabbit hole was even deeper than I thought. Suddenly, the car was filled with a loud, buzzing ring. Alistair's phone. A blocked number. We looked at each other, our hearts stopping. He answered it, putting it on speaker. A man's voice, calm and cold as a winter morning, filled the car. "Mr. Finch? This is Detective Miller. My daughter seems to be under the impression that you and a woman broke into her fiancé's home this evening. I'm sure it's just a misunderstanding. Why don't you tell me where you are, and we can all clear this up?" My blood turned to ice. Fiancé. Mark hadn't just promised her a future, he had promised her marriage. Before either of us could respond, the detective's voice dropped to a low, dangerous whisper that chilled me to the bone. "And by the way, I got a call from the director of the Oak Meadow retirement home. He told me about the fraudulent call regarding Martha Anton's health. Making a false report about an elder is a very serious crime, Mr. Finch. You have 1 hour to meet me. After that, I can't guarantee my officers will be as polite as I'm being." The detective's voice hung in the car like poison gas, choking the air out of my lungs. Fiancé. Elder abuse. 1 hour. The words slammed into me, one after the other. It wasn't just a threat. It was a cage. Detective Miller wasn't just trying to scare us. He was building a case against us, painting us as the criminals. The sweet, satisfying taste of revenge I had felt just an hour ago had turned to bitter ash in my mouth. We weren't just fighting my cheating husband anymore. We were fighting the law itself. It hit me then, a horrifying, sickening realization. Mark had not stumbled into this situation. He had designed it. A good father, a good cop, would have been furious at Mark for building a life on lies with his daughter. He would be investigating Mark, not protecting him. But Detective Miller was doing the opposite. He was Mark's shield. This was no coincidence. My husband, the man I thought I knew, had created the perfect trap for anyone who tried to expose him. But why? Why would a detective protect a man like Mark? Alistair's voice was tight with panic. "That's it. We're done. We have to call my lawyers. We'll turn ourselves in, explain the whole thing." He, a man who commanded boardrooms, was ready to surrender. But something inside me had hardened. The woman who cried over a blue dress was gone. The shock of Mark's final betrayal, promising marriage to another woman, had burned away the last of my fear. "No," I said, my voice eerily calm. "We can't trust anyone. We stick to the plan. We go to the studio." We found the old building in a quiet, forgotten part of the city. The air inside the studio smelled of paint and dust and memories of a life I had left behind. With the door locked, we finally opened the leather bag on the dusty floor. The stacks of money were there, more than I could count. But my eyes were drawn to the other items. A small, bright red notebook and a silver flash drive. These were the real secrets. The money was just a symptom. The cure, or the poison, was hidden right here. I opened the red notebook. The handwriting was not Mark's. It was a neat, precise script, like an accountant's ledger. It was a list of payments, with dates, amounts, and initials. My eyes scanned the page. I saw Mark's initials, MA, next to thousands of dollars being paid out, month after month, for years. Then I saw the other initials, the ones for who was receiving the money. My breath caught in my throat. FM, Frank Miller. It wasn't just protection. This was a partnership. This was a payoff. My mind flashed back to a phone call I had overheard years ago. Mark was screaming into the phone in his office. "This wasn't the deal," he had yelled. "You can't keep bleeding me dry like this." I had assumed it was about his work, a business deal gone wrong. I never imagined he was talking to a police detective. Detective Miller had his claws in Mark long before Clara ever came into the picture. But what had Mark done? What was the original sin that made him a prisoner to a cop? With trembling hands, Alistair took the flash drive and plugged it into his laptop. The clock on the screen showed that we had less than 30 minutes before Miller's deadline was up. The drive contained a single video file. No name, just a string of numbers. My heart pounded as Alistair double-clicked. The video was grainy, dark security footage from a parking garage. I saw a younger-looking Mark, arguing with another man. I recognized the other man instantly. It was Robert Vance, Alistair's old business partner. Robert Vance had died of a sudden tragic heart attack about 10 years ago. His death had cleared the way for Mark to get a massive promotion, the one that set him on his path to power. On the screen, the argument grew heated. Mark shoved Robert, hard. Robert stumbled backward, his head hitting the concrete pillar behind him with a sickening final crack. He slid to the ground and didn't move. We watched as a panicked Mark looked around, saw no one, and then turned and ran. Alistair and I stared at the screen, frozen in absolute horror. My husband was not just a liar and a thief. He was a killer. Or at least, he had caused a man's death and covered it up. And now it all made sense. Detective Frank Miller must have been the investigator on Robert's death. He must have found this tape and buried it, choosing to blackmail Mark instead of arresting him. Mark wasn't dating Clara by choice. He was a prisoner, forced to tie himself to his blackmailer's family to ensure his silence. Just then, Alistair's phone rang again, the sound making us both jump. He answered on speaker. It was Miller. "Your hour is up," the detective's cold voice announced. "I'm outside. I can see your light on in the third-floor window. You have two choices. You can walk out that door right now, hand me the bag, and this all goes away. Or my officers can come in and get it. And I promise you if they have to come in, you won't be walking out." The detective's voice on the phone was a judge's sentence. We were trapped. I looked around the dusty art studio, a place where I once created beautiful things, and saw only a cage. Alistair, the man who ran a global company, was pale, his hands shaking slightly. He looked defeated. The video of a man's death played over and over in my mind. We were standing in a room with the evidence of a killing, and the killer's partner was at the door with armed men. There was no escape. We were out of moves, and the game was over. Then my eyes landed on my old forgotten handbag sitting on a dusty easel. It was a simple purse, the one I had carried for years, filled with nothing more than a wallet, keys, and old lipstick. I looked from my simple bag to the leather bag of secrets on the floor. An idea sparked in the darkness of my mind. It was a wild, desperate gamble, a move so risky it might get us killed. But it was the only move we had left. It was a plan built on pure misdirection. I whispered my idea to Alistair, my voice barely audible. His eyes widened in disbelief, then slowly, a flicker of hope returned. We had to assume we couldn't win a fight. But we weren't fighting the entire police force. We were fighting one corrupt man. What did Frank Miller want most in the world? He wanted the evidence that tied him to Mark's crimes. He wanted that flash drive and that red notebook. He thought everything was in that one leather bag. And that was going to be his big mistake. Moving with a speed I didn't know I had, I unzipped the leather bag. My hands dove past the stacks of cash and pulled out the small red notebook and the silver flash drive. I zipped the heavy bag shut again, leaving the money inside as bait. I quickly tucked the real evidence, the drive and the notebook, into a hidden zippered pocket inside my own worn-out handbag. To anyone looking, it would seem like I was just holding my purse. The treasure was now hidden in plain sight. As I secured the evidence, Alistair, his mind sharp again, grabbed his laptop. "He'll destroy it," he whispered urgently. "The second he gets his hands on that drive, it's gone forever. We need a copy." While I stood watch at the grimy window, peering down at the silent cars below, Alistair worked frantically. He began uploading the video file to a secure online server he owned. The progress bar on the screen seemed to crawl. 10%, 30%, 70%. Each second felt like an hour. My heart pounded with every tick of the clock. Just as the upload reached 100%, Miller's angry voice erupted from the phone again. "I'm done waiting. Time's up." I grabbed the phone from Alistair. I had to be the one to do this. Taking a deep, shaky breath, I spoke. "We're coming out," I said, forcing my voice to sound scared and defeated. "Please, don't shoot. It's all a misunderstanding. We have the bag." I was no longer the victim. I was an actor, playing the most important role of my life, and the stage was set just outside the door. We walked down the creaky wooden stairs, Alistair holding the heavy leather bag, me clutching my simple purse. When we opened the door, the sight made my blood run cold. 2 police cars were parked like silent predators in the darkness. Detective Miller stood in front of them, alone, his arms crossed. He wasn't in uniform. He just looked like a man who had been deeply inconvenienced. His eyes, cold and hard as stone, were locked on the leather bag. He didn't even give me a second glance. He thought he had already won. "Give me the bag," Miller commanded, his voice a low growl. Alistair placed it on the pavement, then gave it a hard shove. It slid across the ground and stopped at Miller's feet. He bent down, unzipped it, and his shoulders relaxed as he saw the stacks of cash inside. A greedy, triumphant little smile played on his lips. He was so focused on the money, so sure that he had everything, that he didn't even bother to look for the notebook or the flash drive. He had become sloppy. As Miller began to straighten up, his victory smile still on his face, I took a step forward. I held up my phone, making sure the red recording light was visible. My voice was no longer shaky. It was loud, clear, and projected towards the other officers sitting in their cars. "Detective Miller," I announced. "Thank you for coming. We need to report several crimes. Extortion, conspiracy, and the cover-up of the death of Robert Vance 10 years ago. The evidence, including a video of his death, has already been uploaded and sent to the District Attorney's Office and Internal Affairs." Miller froze. His face went from triumph to disbelief, then to pure murderous rage. He looked from my phone to his officers, who were now staring at him, their faces full of confusion. He was caught. His own trap had snapped shut on him. He took a menacing step towards me, his hand moving towards the gun on his hip. But before he could take another step, a black car without any markings screeched to a stop behind his police cruisers. A woman in a sharp suit jumped out. It was Alistair's lawyer. She wasn't alone. 2 serious-looking men in dark suits got out with her, and they walked straight towards Miller. One of them spoke, his voice calm and full of authority. "Detective, the DA wants to have a word with you. Now." The flashing red and blue lights painted the dark street in strokes of chaos. Detective Frank Miller, the man who held all the power just minutes ago, was now the one in handcuffs. He didn't look at me as they put him in the car. He just stared straight ahead, his face a mask of stone, a corrupt king whose castle had just crumbled into dust. As the cars pulled away, a deep, bone-weary silence fell. It was over. The immediate danger was gone. But standing there on that lonely sidewalk, holding my simple purse with the world-destroying secrets inside, I didn't feel the joy of victory. I just felt empty. The weeks that followed were a blur of lawyers and meetings. With the video and the red notebook, the district attorney had everything. Miller's corruption was exposed, and it sent a shockwave through the police department. Mark, without his protector, was completely alone. He was arrested for fraud, for embezzlement, for all the money he had stolen from Alistair's company. He lost his job, his reputation, and his freedom, all in the blink of an eye. He was in a holding cell, waiting for the final charges, waiting for me to deliver the final, killing blow. Everyone expected me to use the video. Alistair's lawyers told me that with the evidence of Robert Vance's death, Mark would be gone forever, locked away for murder or manslaughter, never to see the light of day again. They had the papers all drawn up. They just needed my signature. I sat with the pen in my hand for a long time, staring at the line where my name was supposed to go. I thought of all the pain he had caused me, the years he had stolen, the woman he had tried to erase. I should have signed it without a second thought. But I couldn't. I arranged one final meeting. Not in a lawyer's office, but in a small plain room with nothing but a table and 2 chairs. When Mark walked in, I barely recognized him. The handsome, arrogant man I had married was gone. In his place was a thin, grey, hollowed-out stranger. His eyes were red, and he couldn't look at me. He just sat down and stared at his hands. "Jonna," he whispered, his voice cracking. "I'm sorry. Just, please, don't do this to me. I'll do anything." He was finally begging the woman he had called worthless. I looked at this broken man, and I didn't feel anger or even pity. I felt nothing at all. He was a stranger. "I could destroy you, Mark," I said, my voice quiet but steady. "I could show them the video, and you would disappear into a dark hole for the rest of your life. You would never see the sky again." I saw a flicker of pure animal terror in his eyes, the same terror I'd felt in the attic. In that moment, I had all the power. I held his entire life in my hands. "But I'm not going to," I said. He looked up, his face filled with shocked confusion. "That video is the ugliest thing I have ever seen. It is filled with death and fear and your weakness. For 20 years, you filled my life with ugly things. Not anymore. My life is mine now, and I am choosing to fill it with beautiful things. And you, Mark, are not worth the space that ugliness takes up in my head." I was not giving him mercy. I was giving myself freedom. I was choosing to walk away from the darkness, not carry it with me forever. "You will plead guilty to every financial crime," I continued, my voice cold as steel. "You will go to prison for many years. You will sign over the house, the cars, and every penny you have left. You will sign away your rights as a father. You will become a ghost. You will give your son the only gift you can still give him, a life without you in it. That is the price for my silence on what happened to Robert Vance." I was erasing him, just as he had tried to erase me. It was the perfect, quiet revenge. He did everything I asked. He signed the papers with a shaking hand. The house, his money, his pension, it all became mine. But it wasn't for me. I met with Clara one afternoon. She was a broken girl, a single mother whose whole world had been a lie. I didn't tell her about the violence or the death. I just told her that Mark was a thief who was going to prison. Then I gave her a check, enough to buy a small house and start over, far away. And all the money from that leather bag, I put into a trust for her son, Leo. A boy who would grow up never knowing his father's sins. Today, my life is quiet. I live in the small art studio, the one I bought from Martha. The sunlight streams in through the big windows, and the walls are filled with my paintings, bright with color and life. Sometimes Alistair stops by with coffee, a good friend who saw me when I was invisible. I am not Mark's wife. I am not a victim. I am Jonna, a painter, a woman who found her strength in the rubble of a broken heart. I didn't just get revenge. I got my life back. And that is the sweetest victory of all. Thank you for watching this story to the very end. If it moved you, if you believe in the power of starting over and finding your own strength, Please give this video a like and share it with someone who might need to hear it. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more stories of justice and empowerment. We all have a story inside of us, and sometimes we just need a little push to pick up the pen and write the next chapter for ourselves.